It is 1470. Morning fog rolls down from the Thessalian mountains, wrapping the convent of St. Catherine in pale, breathless light. Inside, 23 women kneel in a chapel that smells of wax and pine smoke. Their chants rise in thin threads, a familiar melody worn smooth by repetition. But this morning, something is wrong. The rhythm falters. The air feels heavier, as if the stones themselves are listening. From outside the walls comes the distant clatter of armor, faint but certain. The sisters pause, exchange silent glances. Then a bell rings, one clear note that slices through the valley. It should be a call to prayer. Instead, it becomes an alarm. Down in the valley, crimson banners move like a tide through the mist. The Ottoman army. The same river of soldiers that swallowed Constantinople now winds its way toward this small, forgotten convent. Abbess Elani rises from her knees. She is neither tall nor imposing, but the air around her seems to still when she stands. She grips a small silver crucifix, its surface worn smooth by decades of prayer. The women behind her keep chanting, louder this time, as if sound alone might build a wall between faith and fate. "They are coming," Elani whispers. "Then we will meet them as we are," Sister Theodoris replies, 70 years old and blind in one eye. Outside, the bell rings again, half swing, half scream, and then the sound fractures as iron meets stone. The tower falls. That was the last bell St. Catherine ever rang. And 5 centuries later, if you stand on that hillside, locals swear you can still hear it echo when the wind blows east. To understand what happened here, you must step back 17 years to 1453, when the unthinkable became inevitable. Constantinople fell. The jewel of Christendom, a city older than empires, collapsed in 53 days of cannon fire. When the smoke cleared, Sultan Mehmed II rode through the gates and entered the Hagia Sophia. He looked up at the mosaics, at the saints and angels that had watched over a millennium of worship, and he gave an order. Cover them. The crosses were plastered. The bells melted into cannonballs. The hymns replaced by the call to prayer. But Mehmed wasn't interested in faith. He was interested in memory. He understood that conquest is temporary, but erasure, that's forever. He didn't want martyrs. Martyrs live in songs. He wanted silence. And so, a new weapon was forged. Not a sword, but a policy. Erasure. Churches were converted or abandoned, monasteries emptied, records rewritten. Where faith had been a flame, it became ash. By 1470, that quiet war had reached the valleys of Thessaly. And the convent of St. Catherine stood alone, a final flicker of Latin prayer in a land that now bowed east. The Sisters of St. Catherine were ordinary women bound by extraordinary devotion. They grew herbs for medicine, stitched robes for the poor, and copied psalms by hand. Sister Magdalena, 19, had joined after raiders killed her family. Sister Irene, 62, still prayed for a son lost to plague decades earlier. Each had fled the world, believing the walls of the convent would protect them from it. At dawn, the Ottomans arrived. They did not storm the gates, they surrounded them, patient, methodical. Then came the thunder of artillery. The first cannonball struck the bell tower. Stones splintered, dust rained like snow. In the courtyard, the women screamed, ducked, prayed. But Eleni did not move. She raised her crucifix and began to sing. One by one, voices joined hers until 23 voices drowned the roar of cannon fire. For a heartbeat, even the soldiers hesitated. By noon, the gates burst open. But instead of swords, the men carried ledgers. They moved through the convent counting bodies, furniture, silver, anything worth owning. To them, these women were inventory. A translator read the decree aloud. Those who accept the Sultan's mercy and conversion will be spared. Those who refuse will face the punishment of rebellion. Elani stepped forward. Her voice was soft but steady. "Tell your sultan," she said, "that we have already given our lives to a king greater than him." The officer, Hassan Pasha, smiled. Not the smile of cruelty, but of a man who believes he already knows how the story ends. The sisters were locked inside their own chapel. No food, no water, no light. Outside, soldiers laughed and drank. Inside, 23 women knelt in the dark, waiting. By the third night, their lips were split and bleeding. One whispered, "They mean to starve us." Eleni answered, "Then let hunger be our prayer." On the fourth morning, the door opened. Hassan Pasha entered, flanked by guards. He spoke softly, almost kindly. "The Sultan offers clemency. Travel to Constantinople. Plead your devotion before him. He may yet be moved." Eleni looked at her sisters, hollow-eyed but alive. "We will walk," she said. 23 women set out on foot, hands bound, walking through fields of dust. No carts, no shade, no mercy. The soldiers followed at a distance, writing in ledgers as each woman fell. By the second day, Sister Irene collapsed. They buried her with bare hands. By the sixth, only 18 reached the coast, but those who remained were transformed. They no longer begged. They no longer wept. They walked in silence. A silence heavier than steel. Even Hassan began to avoid their eyes. His notes grew shorter. 18 remaining. Nothing more. In Constantinople, the women were chained aboard a galley. The manifest listed them simply: religious captives, female, for conversion and service. The sea punished them with storms. Salt burned their skin. Ropes cut their wrists. But they whispered psalms, and sometimes even the sailors listened. When the ship entered the Bosphorus, dawn turned the city gold. The nuns saw minarets and domes rising like thorns and thought, heaven must look away now. They were led through the city, past markets, fountains, and beggars. People stared. A few crossed themselves when guards weren't looking. At the palace gates, they were taken underground. No witnesses, no records, just a staircase spiraling into damp stone. Below Topkapi, they scrubbed marble floors, carried water, and tended fires for rooms they would never see. At night, they gathered in a storage room and prayed, so quietly even the rats ignored them. They used crumbs for communion, a shard of mirror for a cross, a broken bowl for an altar. And they carved tiny crosses into the wall, one for each night survived. Centuries later, 2011, restoration workers broke through a false wall beneath the palace. Behind it lay a small chamber lined with hundreds of carvings, crosses, Latin letters, a bird with outstretched wings, and beneath them a single phrase, Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness. Traces of candle wax mixed with herbs showed that these women had endured far longer than any historian imagined. Perhaps months, perhaps years. One archaeologist described the walls as a prayer written in fingernails, and beside the bird, 2 faint Greek words, "We endure." No Ottoman record mentions their deaths. Only a single ledger entry dated 1482. Staff deemed unproductive, disposed. The empire lasted another 4 centuries, but those scratches on the wall, those survived. This isn't a story about religion. It's a story about erasure, about what power does when it's afraid of memory. Empires fall, but what people carve into stone outlives them. The Ottomans rewrote maps, languages, entire cultures. But they couldn't rewrite those walls, because memory is stubborn. Faith, real faith, is defiance disguised as surrender. Those women didn't reclaim their convent. They didn't live to see freedom. But they left something no empire could confiscate, proof that they existed. When tourists walk the palace today, they take photos of golden ceilings, unaware that below their feet lies a room of crosses carved by ghosts. Sometimes, when the air cools, guides say you can hear faint singing in Latin. Maybe it's imagination, Or maybe it's history refusing to stay silent. Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. History is written by the victors, but memory is written by the survivors. When archaeologists found that chamber, one of them whispered, "How long did they keep the vigil?" The wax traces suggest years. The depth of the carvings, desperation layered over time. Imagine it, night after night, in absolute darkness, they kept carving, knowing no one might ever see. That's not just faith, that's rebellion in its purest form. So remember them, not as victims, as voices. Because every time we tell their story, the empire that tried to erase them loses again. Subscribe, not for us, but for them, to keep the light shining in the dark.